Hello out there in TV land, for anyone that remembers that. I'm here again this time with a watercolor for adults video. Lately I've been trying to share more videos of how to do watercolor, which is a little bit more involved. This is a longer video, so stick around if you're into that, if you want to learn. Also, jump over to my first video on setup, and there's different tips and explanations and things in there that I may have missed out on this video. I try to repeat myself because I don't know if you've seen my other stuff, and repetition is always helpful to stick in your head, but I missed some things. So it will be helpful to go back and watch that one if you haven't seen it yet. So just check that out in the description. There should be a link there for you. So what I normally do here, and it's definitely not necessary, but I like to for reprints, and in case I make these downloadable at some point, is to do the initial drawing on like computer papers, copy paper, and then I'll scan that in and print a version of it onto the Bristol board. The other reason I do this is that, especially if I'm coming up with something totally new, which is most of the time, if I draw it on the computer paper, I don't have as much of an issue saying, okay, I don't like the way this turned out, let me just recycle this paper. But if I commit to the Bristol first thing and I don't like it, the more I erase, the more the paper kind of comes up, and especially if I'm planning on adding paint to that later, adding water, then the integrity of the paper is not as good as it would have been originally. So anyway, there's an explanation on that. And hopefully now I've got you totally up to speed, so let's just go ahead and get started already. The drawing is done, and now I've printed a scanned in version of it. I'm taping it to my piece of cardboard. That way when I add the water to it, the paper doesn't start to curl up. So I typically work with more like the cake kind of watercolors. I get it in the tube, but then when I use it, I let it dry up. So I just need to add water to reactivate it. I don't really like to just leave pooled watercolors covered, because I've had them mold before and it just doesn't work out that well. Also, I find I can get more like a higher saturation level if I have like the dried out watercolor and I can decide how much water I want to add. So the first color I'm going to start with is yellow. Now, depending on what color I want it to end up being, this might be different, but I pretty much always start with yellow as the base. Start with the yellow, add a good amount of water, and that way I can spread this around evenly without it drying too quickly before I've got my whole space covered. So I want to make sure it's the same amount of like liquidity, the same amount of paint across the whole thing. You don't want any part of it drying for the far side of what you're painting. The same color dries. Now that layer is dry, so I've given that some time. You didn't see that part, but there's been some time. You can also hit it with a hairdryer, as long as you don't have too much water pooled on there and you put it at a low intensity, then you can totally use that, or a heat gun, of course. So anyway, once the first layer is dry, then I'm going to go in and make it richer with another yellow, a brighter one. I like using round brushes most of the time, because even like the bigger one that I was using, it can hold, if you have a good brush, it can hold a lot of water. And the idea usually is that you can, depending on how you're pressing it down, you can cover a large area, or if you bring it up to where just the tip of the paintbrush is touching, you can get small details and not have to switch brushes so much. So that's why I tend to stick to the round ones. So I'm back to my yellow ochre now, and I've got a small round brush to fill that in. So now you'll see I've given that lemony yellow color just a few moments to dry, and I'm going in now. I'm adding the yellow ochre on top again where I want more of my shadows to be. So the lemon color is still wet, and I'm doing this on purpose. I'm adding the yellow ochre so that to the already wet paint underneath, so that it kind of bleeds into that. Not too much. If you have like a really watery surface and you go ahead and add another color to it, it's just going to bleed all through it, and that might be what you want in some occasions, but this time that's not what I'm going for. Now that the yellow layers have dried, I'm gonna go in, add a little shading to the belly, and then add my intended color, green. So as you can see, I've got this kind of crazy color palette going. I've been trying to use up these colors for a while, so don't ask me what colors they are. Some of them I kind of know, but I'm gonna be honest, it's a pretty good mixture going on here. This is mainly a purple, so purple mixed with like a little bit of brown, so we've got kind of that grayish purple going on. So I'm just adding that to the white of the belly with my small round brush, and you'll see what I've done is like dried out my brush after I've added that color. Got some fresh water there. It doesn't look fresh, but it's just because that jar is kind of stained. And then added a little bit of water to bleed it out, so I don't have that solid edge. It's more of a feathered edge. Feathered, I like that. Okay, so now I've got my green. I've got that kind of dark Kelly green going on here. And I'm adding that on my shadow area first. Another thing I should mention about these colors is they were given to me by a family member who passed away. She left me all of her watercolor supplies, which was really sweet. And so she had so much of it. I've actually been using it for years. Also because I work small mostly, so I'm not using up a lot of this paint. So these colors, I really truly don't know which ones they are, but they work very well for me and I'm super appreciative of them. So yeah, I'm adding this dark green on the shadow, like the feather, the underside of the feathers kind of area, the wings. All right, I'm gonna give that section a moment to dry. I'm gonna jump down here to my legs and add this sort of yellow, this golden yellow color to that yellow ochre color. Ooh, I'm getting tongue-tied here. To make that more saturated and kind of brighten that up. I'm also matching that color on the beak. I'm just kind of doing this erasing technique. So I cleaned out my brush and I keep drawing it out. I'm just trying to soak up a bit of that excess color because I want to leave a little bit of that yellow underneath, that first yellow, as a highlight on the beak. So this erasing technique, technically, no, you can't erase watercolor, but what you do essentially is if you have too much water or color you're not super thrilled with, you take a dry brush, or mostly a dry brush, and you go in there and you soak it up. You like lift the color out. Moving on to some details now, and I'm speeding up the video for you all. So I'm back to my small round brush. I'm pretty much using this the rest of the time because I'm just doing the fine details. Got my brown, so I'm using that as the shadow on the parts that are going to stay yellow, so the beak and the feet. All right, so I clean my brush, and now it's a little heavier than I'd like it to be, so I'm just kind of using a little bit of clean water, fresh water, to just blend that out. Okay, I'm low on the screen, and I don't like to waste anything, so I have cut open this tube of paint, and I am peeling the dry watercolor out, or sometimes I'll just work straight from that dry tube. All right, so once I have enough to work with and my brush isn't too saturated, I'll have to test it out and see. I'm using this lighter green color just to go over almost all the yellow. So I'm leaving some as the kind of highlight. Once that's all in there, rinse out the brush and blend this out so it's not such a harsh line in between the colors. And going over all of the darker green. All right, lastly, now that that's dried a bit, I gave that some time. I've got my darkest green with a little bit of dark blue that I'm mixing together, and I'm just getting some really crisp details. So I want to make the feathers more evident here. Finally add that eye in. We'll give that some time to dry. Back again and giving my eye a little bit more definition with some shading. And blend that out. And I'm doing a little bit more blending out here. Just adding a couple little lines in here to give some more detail and definition. Here is our finished little birdie. But because I like to do some kind of funky cartoony stuff, I added a little bit more. So bam, here's that guy. And I honestly thought I was recording this portion where I added this bit, but that never actually went through. So sometime in future videos, I will include that bit when I do this kind of stuff. Oh, quick note, the white on here is Prisma color pencil. Well, that is it. But I hope you enjoyed painting this with me today. I plan to come back with more, so check back with me if you enjoyed this and you want to try some other techniques and other subjects. Also, you know, do these again. Try a little bit of a different style, different colors, or just, you know, to get the practice of doing it again and again and again, which can be boring, honestly, but it's good if you're trying to learn. Also, if you want to send me what you created, I would love to see it. So there's some information in the description box, how to send it my way, and I hope to see what you've created. All right, give this a like if you liked the video, and subscribe if you want to see more. Hope to see you next time.